In this week's episode of the Art of Soul podcast, we're going to talk about the differences between being a professional and being an amateur artist and how you can make the transition if you're looking to become a professional. Welcome to the Art of Soul podcast. Each week we explore what it means to be an artist, finding your artistic voice, developing your artistic skills, and how to build a professional career and business around your art. Now, please welcome your host, artist and art teacher, Rod Moore. G'day, folks, and welcome to the Art of Soul podcast. My name's Rod Moore. I'm a full-time artist and art teacher, and I'm excited to bring you this episode of the Art of Soul podcast. And what we're going to talk about today in this episode is something that really changed my outlook and my view on what I was doing with my art. And it was the foundational material that I needed to really make that transition from just being an amateur, just playing with it, to becoming a full-time professional and earning a six-figure plus income through my art and building multiple streams of income around my art. So we're going to talk about this in detail today. I've identified probably about 15 different key points that I want to discuss with you. So this might be a bit longer than our previous podcast, but I think if you are serious about your art career, then this will be important information and you may want to take notes. Some of this information has come from my reading of a gentleman by the name of Steven Pressfield. He's an author. He wrote The Legend of Bagger Vance, among others. But there were a couple of books that he wrote which were aimed at artists and in particular writers. But I think they're very applicable to what we're going to talk about as artists of any genre, 2D, 3D, doesn't really matter. That's visual arts and performing arts and so on. It really doesn't matter. I think the thinking behind the information in these books it applies to all of us. So the books that I read of his were The War of Art, which talks a lot about resistance to actually making your art. And the next one was called Turning Pro, How Do You Make That Transition? And then there was a third book called Do the Work. And if you are a serious artist or serious about being a working artist, I highly recommend reading those books. But the information I'm going to share with you today is partly from what I learned through those books, but also partly through my own experience in building an art business and building my life around my art over the last 9 years. So let's get straight into them. The first one is mental attitude, right? So typically from the experience that I've had encountering lots of different artists along the way, I find there's a lot of people out there with negative attitudes. They just have a real down sort of attitude. And most of these people are typically amateur artists, hobby artists. They're people who would like to sell their work and make some money from their art, but their attitude's really bad. They've got a defeatist mindset. They're negative about everything. They use language like, back in the 80s or the 90s, it was better then. Nobody's buying art today. So there's this negative dialogue going on constantly. The pro, on the other hand, has a very positive outlook. The pro sees there's opportunity everywhere, that it's never been a better time than right now, and they have a very positive, optimistic outlook. And I think it's almost impossible to go on and become a success, whatever that means to you as an artist, if you're held back by a negative mental attitude. And so this might require a level of personal development. You need to go and work on yourself and really become consciously aware of your thought processes. Are they typically negative, or are you leaning more towards the positive side? Now, just having a positive mental attitude in and of itself doesn't guarantee success, of course, but it makes it so much more possible. And I challenge you to really spend the next 48 hours and really tune in consciously to your own attitude. Do you constantly talk in the negative, why things won't work, why it's not possible, why there's no point trying, or are you positive? Really challenge yourself. And if you identify that you are more on the negative side, you need to start to work on that and become more of a positive person who has more of an optimistic outlook on life. Because if you think you're going to fail, then you're probably going to, right? If you think nobody's going to buy art, then that's probably going to be true for you, right? But if you have this positive, upbeat sense of everything's going to work out, it's going to be great, this is going to be my best painting ever, or my best piece of jewelry, or whatever, and you're just constantly in this positive mindset, then everything changes. The energy around with which you operate changes. And you start to attract positive things to you, right? If you have a negative energy around you, you only attract more bad things into your life, right? We'll talk about the concept of attraction in a later episode of the Art of Soul podcast. But for now, become aware of which side of the fence you're on. Are you mostly negative or mostly positive? And if you're mostly negative, get to work on fixing that. That'd be the number one thing you can do to help you move towards becoming a professional in any endeavor in life, right? The next one is inspiration, right? So the amateur hasn't painted this week because they weren't feeling inspired. They're waiting for their muse to turn up. They're waiting for somebody else to inspire them. Now, I have the unique position where I teach thousands of artists around the world to paint, learn to paint. And the number of times I get comments like, oh, this is, a great instruction. You've inspired me to paint. That I find that a really curious statement because if you're seeking external inspiration, like the muse or whatever, right, or from another artist, then you're not going to be able to become a professional. Because to become a professional artist in 2D, 3D, performing arts, whatever, right? I just use artist as a generic term. To become a professional artist, and what I mean by professional is you get paid, right? A professional's full-time and they're earning enough money in their pocket from their art or whatever business they can build around their art to make it no longer viable for them to have a job, right? Not even a part-time job, because there's enough money coming in and you're working hard enough that you just can't fit a job in anyway. So this is what I mean by professional. You get paid for the work you do as an artist. And a professional doesn't wait for inspiration to turn up. A professional just goes into the studio and commences work, and inspiration will turn up, but it has to find you working, as Pablo Picasso said, right? So a professional just gets up every day and goes to the studio and starts work and then works all day and doesn't question it. They don't need inspiration, especially external inspiration, okay? Now, I read a book by Jack White, who was a fabulous US artist, and he was writing I think the book is called The Art of Making It, possibly. That was all about how to build a career around your art. And somebody asked him this very question. An amateur artist asked him, where do you get your inspiration from? And he jokingly said, from the US Postal Service. And this other artist looked at him confused. What do you mean the US Postal Service? And he said, well, every week I get a big white envelope, because he was living away from his normal residence at the time. So every week a big white envelope would turn up at the place he was staying, and he'd open the envelope, and in there would be all the bills, the mortgage, the power bill, the telephone bill for his regular residence. And he said, that's my inspiration, right? Now you think about that. What he's saying is really that he hasn't got time to wait for inspiration to strike him, because there are bills that need to be paid, right? The rent or the mortgage, food on the table, that's his inspiration. And all of the professional artists that I've met are pretty much, they're very workmanlike. They don't question whether they're inspired or not. That's for somebody else to worry about. They just get up and go to work. So that's another big difference. The next one is production versus being busy. So amateurs, hobby artists, they love to be busy. They go into their studio and they reorganize it and so on. Or they love to catch up with artist friends and coffee and talk about art, or they love to watch videos on YouTube and or take courses and read books on art and think about art and talk about art with their arty friends and go to the art supplies store. But they don't really produce consistent enough product to be able to generate an income stream from it. The professional, on the other hand, knows that as much as he's an artist or she's an artist, we still have to produce a product to sell. And that production of the product to sell requires just consistent daily effort, just grinding away, doing the work, right? It's the work that leads you to be in a position where you can then become a professional. Because if you don't have sufficient product being created and produced and finished and ready for market on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, you can never generate enough income from your artwork, right? So it's production that you need to think about. And so professionals see their work as a product, creation of a product ready for market, and doing enough of that to generate the income that they desire. The amateur doesn't think about their art that way. They think their art is somehow otherworldly or has some magical qualities that shouldn't be commoditized or productized or seen as a product. And some artists get very upset when you talk about art in that term, right? But most professionals that I've met produce product and put it out into the marketplace. The same as any other business, right? If you're in the widget business, you know, every day you go and you turn on the conveyor belt and the machines and your staff come in and they stand there and they produce widgets, right? A sufficient volume of widgets to generate an income in the marketplace. If production is low, then sales are going to be low. And if sales are low, your income's low. And then you go out and get a job in a factory, right? And you only pay part-time. So production versus being busy, right? You don't want to just be busy doing art stuff. You want to produce finished product that can go out into the marketplace. So that leads me to the next point. The next point is emotional attachment. Now, when I started out painting, I was emotionally attached to every single painting that I ever did, right? And that lasted for the first couple of hundred paintings. And then after that, I was like, well, it's just another painting, right? I used to worry that if I spilt, if I had a painting just the way I wanted it to, and then I accidentally spilt another color of paint on it, or I dropped it on the floor, or, you know what I mean? Like, if anything happened to it, I was terrified of that happening because every painting was so precious to me. And the idea of releasing them into the marketplace so that somebody else could enjoy it, that was a mentally challenging thing for me early on. But then when I made the decision that I was going to become a paid artist, a full-time professional artist, I had to change my thoughts on that. I couldn't be emotionally attached any longer, right? So I had to shift my emotional attachment. My emotional attachment now is around putting as many pieces of artwork into the lives of other people, right? Injecting a little piece of me and my creativity into the world, into the homes and the businesses of people who own my artwork around the world. So I've become emotionally attached to that scenario instead of attached to the artwork, right? So you have to let the artwork go into the marketplace. That brings me to my next point. So many people fall in love with the outcome of a successful art career, but they don't fall in love with the process. So amateurs see highly successful artists who have opening shows and it sells out, or they're in museums, or they're teaching a workshop and there's 20 people there, and they're highly revered artists winning art prizes. Amateurs look at the outcome, the success, and they think, oh, I'd love to be a successful artist, right? They're falling in love with the dream. But professionals know that you have to fall in love with the process, because the process isn't the same as the success, right? The general public view of a successful artist, somebody who's in demand and every painting they paint, flies off the walls, galleries are beaten apart to their door, they win art prizes, they're living this $1 million lifestyle, and so the media beats up that sort of successful artist. And as amateurs, we look at that and think, I'd love to have a piece of that, right? But we're falling in love with the wrong thing. The only way that successful artist got there was to be in love with the process. So the process is you get up, 6 a.m. every morning, and by 6:30 a.m., you've got your cup of coffee in your hand and you stagger into the studio bleary-eyed and you get to work. And you grind it out day after day after day for a decade before you reach that level of success. Nobody ever sees the grind, the process, right? And if you're an amateur right now and you want to go professional, if you can't fall in love with the process, you have no hope of becoming a professional. You have no hope of reaching that glittery success that we all see in the media. You have to fall in love with the process, not the outcome of that process, right? And because if you're in love with the process, when things go bad, when things aren't working out, when you're not getting the results you want, you'll keep going, right? Because it just becomes part of who you are. You love the process of getting into the studio and creating work, okay? If you're not in love with the process and you're just producing work occasionally and hoping to become successful, when it doesn't work out, guess what happens? You quit, right? You quit and you go and try something else. So this brings me to another point. Amateurs are going to give it a try. Professionals are committed and all in, right? What do I mean by that? I was chatting with an artist recently. I'd met her at a workshop or two, and she was asking me about a particular selling strategy, which I recommend to artists as a way to get started selling your art. Not as the end point, but as a starting point. So if you're not if you're not selling art on a consistent and regular basis right now, you need a starting point. And most artists are completely unrealistic about their starting point, which we can talk about that in another podcast. But you need a starting point. So I was talking to this artist about what's a good starting point, and the one I recommend to artists as a way to learn how to market and sell your artwork. And so after the end of this conversation, she looked at me and she said, well, okay, well, I'll give it a try. And I knew that she wouldn't be successful with that strategy, just the way she said it. So amateurs are going to give things a try. Professionals go all in, right? They commit to it and they just do it 10 times harder and with greater velocity and greater quantity and for a longer period of time than what amateurs do. And that's why eventually they break through. So this artist was really, what she was really wanting was, what's the secret, to making sales? And the secret is there is no secret. You have to go all in. You have to commit fully to a course of action. So if you find a marketplace, an online platform, for instance, where you think you might try and sell your work, you can't just give it a try. You can't put 10 pieces of artwork up there and then when nothing sells, go, oh, that didn't work, right? The truth is you didn't work. It's not that it didn't work because it is probably working for somebody else somewhere. It's you that didn't work because you're just giving it a try. You have to be all in, right? You have to put 500 pieces of work up there and then consistently put regular pieces of work up, and really go all in, master the platform, learn how to write the right copy that becomes appealing to people, take better photos, you know what I mean? Like you have to be all in and master a strategy rather than, oh, I'll give it a try, right? Now, I'm not making fun of that particular artist. I was like that, right? It wasn't until I learnt what it takes to be a professional that I upgraded my attitude and my thinking to these things. So I'm not having a go at anyone. This is just the way it is, right? If you're just going to give something a try, you're probably going to fail at it, just to be honest, right? You might get lucky and sell a piece. In fact, I watched one artist come onto a platform which sells a lot of artwork and put up 20 pieces and sold a couple in the first week, right? And, was posting all over social media about how wonderful he's going with his art. But then he only posted 20 pieces up and didn't continue with that. And guess what happened to his sales, right? Disappeared. It was just a couple of lucky sales. I'm not about lucky sales. I'm about consistent and regular and reliable income building. That means consistent and regular and reliable production of artwork and being all in with one or two or five platforms where you constantly put that artwork up there. All right. So the amateur is going to give it a try. The professional is all in on a strategy. Next one is time. Right? The amateur never seems to have enough time, which probably gets back to that productive versus busy idea we talked about earlier. But the amateur never has time. They're always busy. The professional makes time. And it might surprise the amateur to really understand how much time it takes to become a professional, but it really does take time. This is not a 9-to-5 job. You just won't become successful working 9-to-5. I don't believe. There might be artists who have done it in less time, but I really think to become a full-time working professional artist who makes a substantial income and it's consistent and reliable, that it's going to take a large amount of effort, right? It's probably going to take 50, 60 hours a week at least. So the professional makes time and prioritizes key activities within their time. The amateur never has time. Now, there was a time in my life when I was working a full-time job and I wanted to be free of that job, right? And this is going back 20 years ago. And so I started a little internet business and I had no time to be doing that. I'd leave early in the morning to get the train to my job, which was in the city, an hour and a bit away. And then I'd catch a train back. And by the time I got back, it was late and I was tired, right? So, but I was really committed to becoming a professional, like to breaking free from the rat race, right? So the only option I could see was to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and work an hour and a half in the morning on my project, and then go off and do my day job, which paid the bills, right? And then on the weekend, every hour I could squeeze out of the weekend is what I do. So if you're an amateur right now and you've got a day job and you don't think you've got time, you've got to make time, right? So you've got to carve out an hour and a half a day for 5 days a week, and then you need to get another 10 to 20 hours out of your weekend, right? It comes down to priorities. People say they want to be a professional artist and sell paintings or sell their work, but they don't want to prioritize the effort required to get to that point. So you have to look at your time and say, okay, where can I squeeze out time? And in that time, I'm only going to focus on production, right? I'm not going to clean the studio or anything. Just produce something that you can sell, right? Because the reality is, if you want to be a professional artist, which means an income earning artist, you need to have lots of things to sell. End of story, right? If you don't have lots of things to sell, you're only going to make a trickle of income. If you want a lot of income, you need lots of things to sell and have lots of things available in the marketplace and lots of people looking at them, right? Pretty simple. I mean, it's common sense. Next one is responsibility. This is a big one. The amateur thinks that other people should make them successful. Like, if I could just get into a gallery, then I'd be successful because the gallery owner would have the responsibility of selling my work, right? Or if I could just get discovered, I used to know a couple of young artists who've been through, university, art school, and their whole thing was about finding an agent or being discovered. And I remember one of them telling me very gleefully he's been in discussions with an agent who's going to help mold his career. And so where is he placing responsibility? On a third party. He doesn't think he can be he doesn't think he can be successful on his own. And that's what a lot of amateurs do. They really believe in being discovered or somebody else building their career for them. And look, that does happen. But if you are relying on somebody else making you successful, it's such a hit and miss. You might as well go and buy a Taslotto ticket. You know what I mean? Like, the chances of it happening are pretty low. Whereas the professional takes personal responsibility for every aspect of their business. If I'm not making enough sales, it's because I'm not doing enough efforts towards making enough sales. Me personally, right? I take personal responsibility for every aspect of my business. You have to if you want to become successful, I believe. Again, there's exceptions to every rule, but I think you'll find the vast majority of artists who are working today making, say, 100,000 plus, because that seems to be a magic number for a lot of people. But if you go and find any artist making 6 figures plus, and they all take personal responsibility for what they're doing, right? Now, sure, that doesn't mean they're not in galleries, but they're not relying on a gallery. They might be in 3 or 4 galleries, right? And always looking for another marketplace and another outlet where they can get their work seen. So take personal responsibility for your art and your success in your art, okay? Next one. And this gets back to what I was talking about before, is that a lot of artists are looking for what's the right way to sell your art, right? What platform should I go on? Is it Etsy? Do you think I should sell my work on Etsy? Or I saw you put something up on eBay. Do you think I should sell on eBay? Am I going to get sales on eBay? Or, what about Saatchi online? I wonder if I could make... So they're looking for the answer. And the answer is not one platform. The answer is yes, all of them will work. There's sales being made on all of them. Otherwise, they wouldn't exist, right? The answer is not which one. It's all of them. You should be on all of them, but you can't start on all of them. You've got to pick one platform and really go and master that platform, right? And to go all in on that platform. And again, getting back to what I was saying before, if you put 10 paintings up there and think you're going to start making sales, you're dreaming, because you just get lost in a sea of tens of thousands of other artists and hundreds of thousands of pieces of artwork, right? You have to create a volume and be there consistently all the time, putting effort into it before you break through and start to get success on a platform. So the question isn't which approach or which platform. It's how do I put everything into a platform and do it consistently for long enough until you break through and get momentum in that platform. That's what the real answer is, right? Professionals know this. They don't just jump from one idea to the next to the next. They pick 1 or 2 strategies and they work those strategies deep and they go for a long time and they put a huge amount of effort into them. And if you do that, if you take that approach, you'll never ask which approach or which platform again, because you'll know that you can take that same way of working and apply it to any of the platforms and get results. Let's talk about marketing and promotion, right? Amateurs don't like to market themselves or promote themselves. Professionals know that if they don't get good at marketing and promotion, they're not going to be professionals for very long, right? So amateurs feel uncomfortable talking about themselves and talking about their artwork. So what amateurs do is they tend to gather together in groups where they feel comfortable. Like if you go to Facebook, there's a whole lot of different art groups, right, where all the artists gather. And they post up their latest painting and they all like each other's paintings and leave comments and they get to feel good about their artwork. And it's all nice, and I'm not saying don't do that, but don't expect to make sales from that because that's not marketing and promotion, right? Some artists buy artwork. I buy artwork. I've just received delivery from the US today. I have a lovely piece of artwork. I won't show you, but it's just sitting on my desk here. So I buy artwork all the time, but most artists don't, right? So if you think that putting a picture of your artwork into online places where it's all artists, you're not going to make sales from doing that. That is not marketing and promotion, right? Promotion would be doing a video talking about your latest piece of art, right? A video might only be 3 to 4 minutes long, but you have your piece of artwork there and you talk about it and what the story behind the artwork is, and at the end of the video you say, hey, if you want to buy this piece of artwork, visit my website, or you'll find it on Saatchi online on my profile and the links underneath, right? So you're pushing people towards taking an action, taking a next step, right? That's what marketing and promotion is. And there's obviously a lot more to marketing and promotion than just that, but that's part of it. Now, professionals know that they have to market and promote constantly, daily, 2 or 3 times a day, right? Amateurs don't know that, and as a result, they think that, amateurs don't like marketing and promoting themselves. And my suggestion to you is, if you don't like marketing and promoting yourselves, get good at it, get over it. Understand that if you want people out in the world to enjoy your artwork and to have their lives enriched by your artwork, right, to spread a bit of joy and magic into people's lives, you need to promote and market that opportunity to people. Your artwork doesn't speak for itself. You, as the artist, have to be the spokesperson for your artwork, right? Don't ever fall into the belief, because it's an erroneous belief, that my artwork's so good it should speak for itself. Well, if you think that, then you just have to ask yourself the question, when was the last time you made a sale, right? Are you making a consistent income from your artwork if it's speaking for itself? And 9 times out of 10, no is the answer, right? Your artwork doesn't speak for itself. You need to be the spokesperson, which means marketing and promotion of your artwork. Professionals know this. Amateurs are terrified of the idea. But when you understand that marketing and promotion is just the bridge between you and your artwork, and some family enjoying their lives becoming more enriched because they've got a lovely seascape that remind them of their holidays and when the kids were little, right? When you understand that you're a facilitator of somebody else's enriched life through marketing and promotion, then you think about it completely differently. Next one is selling. Most amateurs hate to sell. Professionals love to sell for the reason I just said. You know that it's an opportunity to enrich somebody else's life. So I was chatting with an artist once. We were out plein air painting, and he was telling me that he had somebody come up to him when he was out painting one time, interested in buying the artwork, and they didn't come out and directly say, can I buy it? But the conversation was skirting around the idea of, do you sell your artwork? And, they were asking all the right questions, in other words. But this artist didn't know how to have a sales conversation with them, and they walked away. And that's really sad, because that was the perfect opportunity to sell your artwork, right? You need to be able to talk about somebody else owning your artwork, a sales process. And you need to, as a professional, you need a way of taking their money, right? So you can get a PayPal card reader or a square, the square, and plug it into your mobile phone and take their money. But you need to be able to have that conversation with them. And it wasn't long after that because I have no fear around selling, I was out plein air painting with another mate, Colin, and we were painting, and farmer's daughter came up. We were painting this farm nearby. Farmer's daughter came up, and she's like, "Oh, I really like the painting. My grandfather had," so it was the granddaughter. "My grandfather would really like it, and so on." And she ended up buying the painting, right? Because I knew how to have a sales conversation with. And I should point out, it doesn't need to be a cheesy sales conversation. All the old sales training from the 70s and 80s, three options, alternative of choice. You don't need to do any of that. You just need to ask the right questions and be able to give intelligent answers, right? So I asked her questions like, "Oh, do you think your grandfather would like this painting?" And she's like, "Oh, yeah, he'd love it. Does he have a place like somewhere in the house where he'd put it up?" And she's like, "Oh, yeah, definitely in the lounge room over the fireplace." I'm like, "Oh, that'd be awesome." And I said, "Would you be interested in buying it for him?" And that's all you have to ask. Would you be interested in buying it? And she said, "Yeah. How much is it?" And so this is the real key, right? To be able to sell your work. Is I said, "Look, normally this painting, if I took this home and finished it off, and then got it framed and put it into a gallery, it's going to be, for argument's sake, let's say it was going to be $1,000, right?" And I said, "The gallery is going to take 50%, so that brings it down to 500, and the frame's going to cost 100, so that's 400. I said, "How about we make it $300, right?" And she said, "Oh, that'd be awesome." And she bought it, gave me cash for it. Now, I'm not telling you to say, "Aren't I great?" That's not my motive here. I'm telling you this to show you how easy it can be to have a sales conversation with somebody if you know how to do it and you feel good about doing it, right? I feel great about it. I was painting his farm. The granddaughter's going to give him a gift. It's a win-win-win, right? It's a beautiful scenario. And it's just a matter of having the confidence to be able to have a sales conversation. Now, amateurs have fear around selling. Professionals do what I just explained to you. They have a very easy conversational dialogue. And as a result, the buyer feels comfortable, right? Now, you've got to get out of your head all this stuff around selling. So many artists have got all this negativity and this junk in their mind about selling, right? Now, another artist that I'm friends with on Facebook, she posted one time that she's not interested in selling her artwork, right? This same artist, now you think about the psychology of that. I'm not interested in selling my artwork. I do artwork for the love of it, right? That sets up an energetic vibration around you in which it makes it almost impossible for you to sell much artwork. So you're basically pushing away or rejecting the idea of selling your artwork, which is crazy if you want to be a professional, right? Professionals embrace selling and the opportunity to sell. Interestingly, this same artist is always running around doing markets and art shows and, trying to sell her artwork, even though she's got this dialogue saying she's not interested in selling. So you need to really think about that and get over any issues you have with selling your artwork. Next one is money. I've noticed that a lot of amateurs have a hang up around money, especially when it comes to their artwork. And professionals understand that money is just an energy exchange, a value exchange. If you create art, it's a product that goes into a marketplace. In that marketplace, people are willing to exchange their money for that product because they see it's an equal value exchange. And the problem that a lot of artists have is that they overprice their work when they're starting out. And we'll talk about this in another podcast, but really, you've got to have an understanding of basic economics, supply and demand, right? If there's no demand for your work, then the money that you put on your art is probably overinflated right now, which is probably why you don't make any sales. And I was involved with an art show not that long ago, and we had our opening night. And there was one particular artist her artwork was just walking off the walls, right? And she had it really well priced for the value that she was offering in that artwork. And it was reflected in the sales she made on opening night. I happened to be manning the sales register for a period of time, and took two of the sales. Sitting next to me was another artist, an older artist who'd been around for a bit longer, selling nothing, right? And she was complaining about this artist having her prices too low. And I'm thinking about this as she's complaining, and I'm watching what's going on. And in my head, I'm going, it seems to me that the artist that's selling has got the right price point. The one who's not selling has the wrong price point for the value they're offering. And sure enough, I went and checked this artist's prices, and they were 2 to 3 times higher than the one who was selling, but they weren't 2 to 3 times better, or more appealing in the marketplace. Not even close. And so money is a really interesting topic, and a lot of amateurs, they see successful artists in galleries with big prices on their artwork, and they try and work out how much to put on my pieces, and they try and reflect what they see others doing. But what they're failing to understand is that money is basically an economic driver, right? When it comes to your artwork and the value you offer the marketplace, a large part of that value is the demand and supply component. If there's no demand and you've got plenty of supply, then you're not making any money, and your work's probably not worth anything until you build the demand, right? So therefore, we all start, it's a ladder, right? A ladder to climb. At the top of the ladder is those artists who sell their work for $1 million. They're few and far between. The bottom of the ladder is zero, right? We're giving away art. But if we start selling it for $10 a piece, then that gets us on the ladder. And then we can start to climb the ladder. How do we climb the ladder? There's a whole lot of different ways. Building an audience and increasing the demand, increasing the value that you offer in the product you produce, right? There's lots of different ways to climb the ladder and get to a point where you are making gallery type prices for your artwork. But it's all about being consistent, like making sales on a consistent and reliable basis, right? It's not about the one-off sales. So sure, you may have put $1,000 on a piece and sold it 3 years ago, right? You got lucky, right? If you're not able to replicate that, then it was a once-off thing. It was lucky. So you've got to understand, when it comes to money, the marketplace. This is another thing with artists, right? Artists think that they've got collectors for their work, but in reality, what they have is buyers, people who buy the occasional piece of artwork, and not collectors. A collector is somebody who makes strategic investments in artwork because they're following 2 or 3 artists and they want to collect the key pieces from that artist's production, right? And so they'll follow 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 artists, and they're very strategic in how they go about buying the artwork. That's what a true collector is, right? They're generally high net worth individuals. They typically are business people. They make calculated decisions, and they're quite strategic, and they acquire pieces that are going to fit into their collection, right? 99% of us artists, we don't deal with collectors. What we deal with are buyers, and some of those buyers might be repeat buyers, but they typically buy from emotional reasons, right? So stop trying to price your paintings like you're going after collectors, because you're probably not, right? You're probably only appealing to buyers. So you've got to understand that a buyer is considering they get paid each week and they've got X number of dollars of disposable income, and they're comparing buying a new pair of shoes with your piece of artwork that they happen to like, right? So it's an economic decision. It's not a collection decision, an investment decision. It's an economic decision. So you have to understand where you fit into the money picture, right? I'm going to talk more about money because I think it's an important topic for us to talk about. Next one is validation. Where do you get your validation from? Now, the amateurs are always looking for external validation. I know I did this when I started painting. I was always looking for somebody else to tell me it was good enough, right? Or somebody else to give me feedback or a critique, right? But what I was hoping for in that critique was they're going to say how wonderful I was, or how wonderful the piece of artwork was. I wasn't really looking for a genuine critique. I was more interested in getting a pat on the back, right? Because I was seeking external validation from outside of myself. And that's what amateurs do. Professionals know that the only validation that's important is their own validation, right? Am I happy with it? Do I do my best work at the time? And the validation of the marketplace, people who've got their credit card out, right? That's the validation that professionals are looking for. How does the marketplace react? It's nice to have other artists pat you on the back and give you a like on Facebook and a thumbs up. but that doesn't pay the bills, right? That's not what a professional is focused on. A professional is focused on generating an income from their artwork, right? Because their livelihood depends on it. They've got to put their kids through school and put food on the table. So they've got to be focused on the right thing, right? So therefore they have to get their validation internally, right? Am I happy with it? Does this piece feel good for me? Did I do the best job I can? Great, move on. Next product that I'm going to create. So that's a really interesting thing. If you are seeking the approval or the acceptance or the acknowledgement of third parties, external validation, then you've got to get over that and move past that, right? Amateurs always want external validation, and professionals know that it's completely irrelevant what other people think unless they've got their credit card out. Right? That's the only people that really matter. The only people who get a vote, right, as far as validation goes, are the ones who are going to get their credit card out and buy it. Now, this is professional way. Professionals think this way, right? Amateurs don't think this way. They want the approval from the famous, well-known artist to come by their page and like their work, right? And look, we all want that, of course, but that's not what makes you a professional and an income-earning artist, right? That just makes you a happy artist, a happy amateur artist who's probably not earning an income from their work. So validation, it's a really important thing. You need to ask yourself, are you looking for external validation? Are you? Ask yourself that question. Next one is product, right? So the professional sees the work that they produce as a product, a finished product that can go to market. The amateur doesn't see their work that way. They see it as artwork, right? A piece of creation, and they have a completely different view on a whole range of different topics. I'm not going to talk too much about this because I think I've already covered it partly, but you'll know if you're a professional because you are focused on production. You'll have a production schedule, right? You'll have a yearly goal of income, and to get to that income, you'll know how many pieces of artwork you need to produce. Let's say you wanted to make $100,000 a year for the sake of maths, right? And you're going to have an average price of $1,000. That means you need to sell 100 pieces at $1,000 to get to your $100,000 in retail sales value, right? Well, the professional knows that producing 100 pieces of art won't get them there because not everything they produce is going to sell. Therefore, they need to produce 300 or 400 pieces of artwork in that year and put all of it into the marketplace. And they'll sell enough to get to their $100,000 a year income, right? Now, that's just a made-up example for the sake of maths. But it's about creating product and putting that product in the marketplace. That's what the job of an artist is, if you want to be a professional, right? So amateurs don't see the work they do as product, and they don't like talking in terms of their artwork being commoditized or productized because in their mind, they think it cheapens their artwork, right? But if you're not selling your artwork, it doesn't matter what price you put on it. You've overinflated the price more than likely. So your artwork's already cheap, right? Whether you think of it as a product or artwork, it doesn't really matter. The value in the marketplace is already established, whether you've sold it or not, okay? The price you put on it has absolutely no bearing at all on the value of it in the marketplace until you start selling, right? So your art's actually worth what somebody's prepared to pay for it, not a dollar more, right? So think in terms of product. Now, finally, I want to talk about business because amateurs think that they're artists and professionals know that they're in the art business. And like any business, they have to deal with not just the product or the fulfillment of their product or service, right? That's just one component. But there's marketing, there's sales, there's HR, there's employment of people, there's financial management, there's legal, there's administration. They're in a business, right? But being in the art business gives you so much more scope when you start to mentally see yourself in the art business. It gives you so much more scope to be able to create new income opportunities. You have to start thinking like a business person. If you want to be a professional, professionals build art businesses. There's no such thing as an art career. Nobody's going to pay you a regular salary to produce paintings, to stand in your studio all day producing paintings. It's a business, not a job. Now, there's always exceptions to the rule. I'm talking about the vast majority of us, right? I'm in the art business. And because I'm in the art business and I think like a business person, I'm able to open up other opportunities and new income streams and new revenue whilst keeping the current ones going and growing, right? So you've got to start thinking about you as being in the art business, not as an artist, right? Now, part of being in the art business is you engage in artistic activities like producing artwork, but you also need to be more well-rounded than that. And professionals know this, right? Many professionals have had the experience where they've gone along earning income, but they haven't paid enough attention to their finances, for instance, and they've ended up with a big tax bill that they haven't prepared themselves for, right? Or they run into some legal issues which they haven't got protection against, insurances and so on. So you have to think in a more well-rounded way and think and see yourself as being in the art business rather than being an artist as such. If you want to be a professional. Now, if you don't want to be a professional, then it doesn't really matter what you think, right? I'm only talking to those people who want to make the transition from amateur through to professional. And you have to approach it in a very different way to what amateurs are approaching their art right now. So I hope that helps. We've covered a lot of ground here today. A lot of these topics, I'm going to break them down into future episodes of the Artist Soul podcast, and we'll dig into it in more depth and really bring to light some of these subjects, because I think they're important if you want to become an income earning artist, which I think is the greatest thing in the world. Now, some amateurs will say to you, well, you're just being a sellout, right? I love this. You're being a sellout. The artist who's working in a factory 50 hours a week for minimum wage and doing one painting on the weekend, who desperately wants to be a full-time artist, right? But doesn't want to sell and market and be a business person and think of their art as a product and blah, 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 right? Is afraid to take money for their art and has a bad attitude, and it's not like it wasn't in the 80s. And, that artist, right? They're the sellout because they're not doing what they love. I loved art so much, I wanted to make it my full-time, every moment of my day, living and breathing, and occupy all my time. I couldn't afford to have a job because my passion for art was so great. I had to be in the art business, right? So don't ever let anyone tell you you're just being a sellout because you're focused on becoming a successful income earning artist and having your own art business. The real sellout is the person who has fear, right? They're afraid to market and promote themselves. They're afraid to put their artwork into the world and put it onto different platforms. They're afraid to ask for money. They're afraid to close a sale. They're afraid, they're just afraid. And because they're afraid, when you go and start to achieve any level of success, it makes them uncomfortable and they'll start calling you names like sellout, right? But the real sellout is the person who's given into their fears and hasn't learnt the skills required to be successful as an artist in 2020, right? Doesn't matter what happened 20 or 30 years ago. You need current skills. The current skills you need are things like being able to talk on video about your artwork with passion and conviction, right? There's a whole lot of skills that you're going to need 2020 and beyond. You need to get current with your skills, right? Don't give in to the fear of being a successful artist. So don't let anybody ever tell you you're being a sellout. If you're surrounded right now by a group of artists who are negative, they're complaining, nothing's working, they're down on their luck, and they're calling successful artists sellouts, detach yourself from that group and go and find a more empowered group of artists, right? Not always easy to do, but you'll find that the less you immerse yourself in an environment of negativity and closed-mindedness, the better off you're going to be, right? I'm not saying to never talk to those people again, but just don't spend all your time associating with them, right? And if any artist ever tells you you're being a sellout, look them straight in the eyes and say, I think you're the sellout because you're working a day job and doing your art part-time on the weekends. I love art so much I've created an environment for myself where I can do it full-time. Who's the real sellout, right? And that'll shut them up. All right, I got a bit serious there. Sorry about that. Anyway, but I think it's an important topic because some artists are afraid to make that jump to professional because of what their other artist friends might think of them, right? You've got to get that out of your head, ASAP. Hope this has been of help. I'd love to hear your feedback, your comments, your thoughts on this. Probably a controversial sort of subject in some way, some of the things we've talked about, but I'd definitely love to hear your feedback and questions and so on. And hey, if you have liked this episode, please like it, leave a comment and share it on social media so that we can reach out to those other artists who are, like you and I, looking to make that move from being an amateur to becoming a professional artist. My name's Rod Moore. Hope this has been of help, and I look forward to talking to you next week on the Art of Soul podcast. Cheers for now.